Hi, hello, welcome back to Spear Knowledge Center. In this today's session, we'll talk about SOA. It means service oriented architecture. So, service oriented architecture is a style of software design where services are provided to other components by application components or through a communication protocol over a network. It's a principle or independent of vendors and other technologies. So this is a purely independent deployment where you can deploy it and anybody can use from the public sharing place. So in this service oriented architecture, we are going to build a services the separately, and it should have some separate mechanism to build services. That's how we are going to deploy as a separate component, and then we use it, give it to clients or consumers to consume your service, and that way it is going to increase reliability and performance and availability kind of benefits to your service. So in service-oriented architecture, a number of services communicate with each other in one of the two ways, passing data or through two or more services coordinating an activity. So this is just one definition of a services-oriented architecture, and there are a lot of other definitions as we have with relevant to the service-oriented architecture. So basically, this service-oriented architecture having three roles in each of the service-oriented architecture building blocks. Let's see them. What are all those three architectural roles to build this service-oriented architecture? And the first one we'll talk about the no service role here was service provider, uh, say like SOA architecture roles. So as I said, it has three roles. One is service provider. This is one role, and we'll talk about what is that in coming next. I mean, after this listing of three roles here. And second one is a service broker, or you can say it is a service registry or service repository. That means you can say a service registry or service repository. And third one is a service requester or consumer. So these are the three roles in SOA architecture. So it comes to first option, service provider. What it will do is the service provider works in conjunction with the service registry, debating the way, whys and hows of the service being offered, such as security, availability, and what to charge, and more of this. So basically, the service provider works in conjunction with service registry, debating the whys and how of the services being offered. And this role also, considers determines the service category and if there need to be any trading agreements. So it provides, uh, it provides kind of determines, or it determines the service category. So where you can now categorize the services here in this particular role, like kind of service, and it based on this you're going to provide the chargeable guidelines or deployment guidelines and guidelines for the consumer. And if there need to be any trading agreement. Okay, so this is what the service provider is providing. Uh, uh, the kind of category, services category, and there need to be any trading agreements. All this stuff is going to be provided from the service provider. And coming to the second one is the service broker. Service broker makes information regarding the service availability to those requesting it, right, by a consumer or the client. So this service provider determines the service category, and it is going to work conjunction with service provider broker, where it is debating on why and how services are being deployed and what services are being offered. And the service broker is going to be having, or it makes information regarding uh, the available services to those requesting it by the consumer. That means it makes information uh, regarding service availability to those requesting it, right? And that means it is going to provide the service details and its availability for the consumers. And also the scope of the service broker is determined by whoever implements it. So it determines the kind of implementation stuff. Basically, it determines the scope of implementation, whoever is going to implementation by whoever consumes. Okay, and coming to the third role, that is service request. The service requester or consumer locates entries in the broker registry and then binds them to the service provider. So the service requester basically looks at the entries of services in the registry of a service registry or service broker or service repository, and then it starts binding them to the service provider. So they may or may not be able to access multiple services. That depends on the availability or capability of the service requester. So it locates the service entries uh, from the service registry and then binds binds them uh, to the service provider, right? And it may or may not be able to access multiple services. That all depends on the capability of the service provider or service requester, and based on that it is going to fetch the service from the service registry. So these are the main three roles of service oriented architecture, like a service provider and service broker and service requester. And service provider basically provides the category of services they need to be in the trading agreements. And service broker is having all the entries and the information regarding availability of services which are being requested or offered by or requested by consumers, and that is having all the service entries and availability of the service for the consumers. And it determines the scope implementation by whoever consumes. And coming to the third, service requester basically locates the service entries from the service registry and then binds them to the service provider. So, and after this service no, SOA roles, let's look at the characteristics of SOA architecture. So SOA characteristics, SOA architecture uh, architecture characteristics. So, what are all the service-oriented architecture characteristics, and how it is going to be implemented, and how the consumer is being consumes the service based on the architectural characteristics. Architecture, right? So here, while defining concept of service-oriented architecture, it varies from company to company or organization to organization. There are six key tenets that covers the behavior of service and broader concept of service-oriented architecture. These core values includes one is business value, business value, and business value, and the second one is strategic goals, and third one is intrinsic no interoperability, intrinsic interoperability, and fourth one is shared services, and fifth one is flexibility, and last one is evolutionary refinement. So these are the six characteristics of any service-oriented architecture. Business values, strategic goals, intrinsic interoperability, and shared services, flexibility, and evolutionary refinement. So if you look at the business value, so it creates a more competitive business edge by improving the efficiency of collaboration between business process and information technology. So it derives or it drives growth by boosting productivity and enhancing performance and eliminating the frustration with the IT organizations. So business value basically creates more competitive, edge by providing all this stuff. And coming to the strategic goals, so it is going to define some goals to improve the services, like increased organization agility, increased ROA, and reduced IT burden or concrete benefits resulting from the attainment of the remaining four goals. So basically, it increases the availability based on the strategic goals we set it for services, and increase the ROI and improving the efficiency of collaboration, and also reduce the IT burden or concrete benefits resulting from the attainment of the remaining services. And coming to the third one, intrinsic interoperability. So basically, it provides the interoperability. It represents a fundamental goal of service orientation that establishes a foundation for the realization of other strategic goals and benefits. So it basically represents a fundamental goal to integrate any service to establish a foundation for the realization of other strategic goals and other benefits. And coming to the shared services, so this is the fourth one. Service-oriented architecture defines a way to make software components reusable via service interfaces, and these interfaces utilizes sharing space between different services, right? And coming to the flexibility, the concept of flexibility in this SOA solution is the opportunity to exchange the services at runtime between service to service. So the key requirement is the full encapsulation of a service and standardization of interfaces. Okay, it is having more flexibility at runtime. That way you can connect to the other services and instantiate or connect to the different service and adapt to services easily at runtime, and that implies the key requirement in the full encapsulation of services and standard interfaces. The last one was evolutionary refinement. So we generally cannot predict, right, how much business we are going to have it with these services, right? So generally that is the tendency, like we are not able to predict how business will need to evolve over the time, and therefore we cannot initially build and perfect services. That's true, right? At the same time, there is a usually wealth of knowledge that already exists within the organizations, existing business intelligence, and that can be harvested during the analysis and modeling stages of SOA projects. So evaluationary refinement generally, applicable over the time of usage, and over the time of consumption by any consumer and using of the existing services, because we initially not able to predict how much business we have and how much burden on service, how many clients are consuming kind of stuff, and over the time, therefore we cannot initialize build a perfect services with this thinking and with this analysis part. So this is how things are happening in the SOA architecture. These are the five characteristics which comes under this architecture: business value, strategic goals, intrinsic interoperability, shared services, flexibility, and evaluation and refinement. So based on these characteristics, we are going to build a service, and that service is going to be used by a consumer, based on these three roles. Okay, so this is all about service-oriented architecture, and I think you may know that. So to avoid the burden on monolithic concept, like building or implementing everything on one service, that is a monolithic architecture, using a single application layer. So we have been having different problems with that while you manage the service, or while you modify the service, or while you consume any service into the existing service. There are a lot of problems in the matter of perspective of this performance and reliability and availability. Hence, we have to choose this SOA architecture. That's how it is going to independently deploy it, and independently having all the stuff on the deployment server, and can easily achieve all this stuff, which actually having with the monolithic services. So even though it is having same services, the key differences come in the functionality aspects based on service and the functionality you are expecting from the service. So service is obviously the main component. So we may have different services like functional services, enterprise services, application services, or infrastructure services. But each of the services builds on the one before it, creating a system that is not only easy to use, but provides you with a variety of ways to manage your business. As with the any functionality, it's a matter of figuring out what works best for you and your business. So that's all about service-oriented architecture and the characteristics of service-oriented architecture. We basically look at when you implement services to avoid the drawbacks and impacts of monolithic services. I hope you understand the service-oriented architecture characteristics and the benefits of using the service-oriented architecture. And thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe the channel for more videos. Thank you.